Friday evening felt too peaceful to be hiding anything. The candles flickered between us, casting soft shadows across Mark's face. He was halfway through his pasta when he said it, almost casually. "You remember Julia? From college? She's back in town." My fork froze midair. Julia, a name I hadn't heard in years. He smiled as he said it, that faint, secret kind of smile men forget they wear, the kind that once belonged to me. I smiled back, politely, like any wife who didn't feel a knot forming in her stomach. "Julia, your old debate partner, right?" I tried to sound amused, even curious. He laughed, that light-hearted laugh that used to make me feel like home. "Yeah, the same. She's organizing some alumni meetups. I might catch up with her one of these days." One of these days. His tone was too careful, too easy, the kind that means the plan's already made. He went back to scrolling through his phone, grinning at something I wasn't meant to see. I watched the glow of the screen light up his face, and I knew that whatever he was reading, it wasn't about alumni events. My chest felt tight, but I stayed silent. That's what you do when you sense a storm coming. You don't run, you listen. And that night, I heard it begin to whisper. The next evening, he said he was going out for drinks with the guys. It sounded harmless, almost comforting, the way routine excuses do. But that same faint smile was there again, tugging at the corners of his mouth like a secret he couldn't quite hide. I watched him leave, his cologne lingering in the doorway, longer than his goodbye kiss. And as I stood there, alone in the quiet hum of the house, I realized I hadn't seen that smile in months, at least not for me. He went out again the following night, and again after that. Networking events, late meetings, old classmates catching up. The stories blurred into one another, all with that same easy tone, that same casual shrug. But I've lived long enough to know when comfort turns into choreography. He wasn't improvising, he was rehearsing, perfecting his lines, his rhythm, his innocence. I didn't confront him, not yet. I smiled when he came home late, nodded when he apologized, and kissed him goodnight like any trusting wife would. But beneath the calm, I started keeping notes, dates, times, small details he didn't realize he'd left behind. People think revenge starts with anger. It doesn't. It starts with silence, with observation. And I was finally paying attention. By the fourth night, even the air in the house felt different. His side of the bed carried a colder scent, that faint mix of cologne and something I couldn't name. He'd started showering as soon as he got home, humming softly behind the closed door, as if to wash away evidence invisible to the eye. I used to find comfort in his routine. Now, every familiar motion felt rehearsed, deliberate, like a man performing his own alibi. I'd pour myself a glass of wine, pretending not to watch the clock. Each minute that passed was another thread in a story I hadn't written, but one I was determined to finish. Friends would call, the television would hum, but I only half heard it all. My attention was fixed on the sound of tires on gravel, the key in the lock, the soft creak of the floor when he finally came home. Each sound carried a truth, and I was learning to translate it. I didn't cry, not yet. There's a point where hurt turns into clarity, and I'd crossed it quietly. I knew Julia's return wasn't just coincidence. She was the spark, but he was the one holding the match. And if he thought I'd sit in the dark while he played with fire, he didn't know me at all. A week passed, and his absences stopped feeling unusual, which was the most alarming part. What begins as a change soon becomes a rhythm, and I could feel myself slipping into its beat. He left before sunset most nights, his explanations smooth and familiar. Client dinners, catching up with old classmates, the same lines, polished to perfection. But the details began to betray him. His cologne changed, his shirt smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. His phone, once left carelessly on the counter, now lived locked and face down. One evening, I called while he was supposedly at dinner with clients. The phone rang twice, then stopped. Minutes later, a text arrived. "Can't talk now, babe. Big presentation tomorrow." I stared at it, the words blurring as memory filled the gaps. That project, the one he claimed to be preparing for, had ended weeks ago. I even remembered the celebratory champagne in our kitchen, the cork still tucked in a drawer. The lie wasn't even creative. It was lazy. I sat there in silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. That's when the sadness hit me. Not because he was cheating, but because he thought I'd never notice. I used to believe trust was the strongest bond in a marriage. I was wrong. It's observation. And I was beginning to see everything. A few days later, I met Clara for coffee, the one friend who could read my silences. We sat by the window of a small cafe, the kind where time slows down just enough to notice the cracks in your own thoughts. I stirred my cappuccino, watching the foam dissolve. Clara leaned in, her eyes narrowing the way they always did when she sensed something wasn't right. "You've been quiet lately. What's going on?" she asked. I hesitated, the words heavy on my tongue. "It's Mark," I finally said. "He's been catching up a lot since Julia came back." Her eyebrow lifted, and for a second, pity softened her features. "You mean the Julia?" she asked. I nodded. "The one he almost dated. The one he never really stopped texting after graduation." The moment I said it aloud, it stopped feeling like paranoia and started feeling like truth. Clara sighed, her fingers wrapping around her mug. "Liv, are you sure you're not overthinking it?" she asked gently, though her voice betrayed doubt. I looked at her, a small smile breaking through. "I've been overthinking my entire marriage, Clara. This time, I'm just paying attention." She didn't argue. She didn't need to. Because in her silence, I could see it. The same realization that had been haunting me all week. Something was already broken. That night, I couldn't sleep. The room felt too still, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. I stared at the ceiling, tracing shapes in the faint glow from the streetlight outside. Every memory, every laugh we'd shared, replayed like an old movie. And for the first time, I saw all the edits. The moments that didn't quite fit, the details that didn't make sense. Trust has a way of editing truth, softening corners that should have cut. By morning, I was done softening. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, watching the steam rise like a promise. My heart didn't race anymore. It pulsed with quiet certainty. Clara's voice echoed in my mind. "Then stop guessing. Find out." That's what I planned to do, not with accusations or tears, but with precision. Observation would be my weapon, and truth, my evidence. I started small, a photo of his schedule here, a note of his words there. The pattern was forming, even if he didn't see it yet. I smiled as I closed my notebook. Mark thought I was the woman who'd look away to keep the peace. But peace wasn't the goal anymore. Clarity was. And soon, I'd have both. Saturday night came wrapped in quiet anticipation. I told Mark I was exhausted from the week, that I'd go to bed early. He kissed my cheek, his lips brushing the surface like a formality. "Brian and I are grabbing a quick drink," he said, eyes already sliding away. I nodded, pretending to yawn. Inside, I was rehearsing my own plan. The moment the door clicked shut, I waited 2 minutes, then grabbed my keys. The night air was cool, sharp with the scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. I followed his car from a distance, headlights off, my pulse steady but deliberate. It's strange how focus can silence fear. Every sound became sharper, the tires against the road, the hum of passing lights, the rhythmic beat of windshield wipers. He drove downtown, not to the pub he usually mentioned, but to a small wine bar. Intimate, low-lit, the kind meant for whispers, not meetings. I parked across the street and watched through the window. There he was, sitting across from her. Julia, her hair longer now, styled softly around her shoulders. She laughed. That easy, nostalgic kind of laugh that doesn't belong in the present. Mark reached across the table and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. That gesture, small, tender, almost instinctive, told me everything words never could. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply watched. It was almost surreal, seeing the man I'd built a life with look at someone else like that. Every little movement between them spoke louder than any confession ever could. The way he leaned forward, the softness in his eyes, the careless familiarity of it all. It wasn't passion, it was comfort. That's what stung the most, how easily betrayal could look like ease. I pulled out my phone, hands steady, and took a few photos. Not out of rage, but for clarity. Proof, not revenge, at least not yet. Each click of the camera sounded final, like a door quietly closing behind me. I could have walked in, made a scene, demanded answers, but that would have given him the control he'd already abused. No, I'd wait. I'd let the truth breathe on its own. It always does. Through the window, I saw him laugh again, his fingers brushing hers. For a moment, I almost pitied them. Two adults chasing a version of youth that never really existed. But pity has no place in survival. I lowered my phone, started the car, and drove away. The sound of the engine drowned out everything except my thoughts. He'd just written the first half of a story I intended to finish. I drove home slowly, the city lights flickering across the windshield like a film reel I no longer belonged to. On the seat beside me lay a wedding photo I'd taken from our hallway earlier that day, his arm around me, both of us laughing, unaware of what was waiting years ahead. I turned it face down at a red light, unable to stand the reflection of that naive woman who still believed in him. The silence in the car was heavy, but not painful, just resolved. When I got home, I placed my phone on the counter, opened the gallery, and stared at the images. There was something clinical about them, like evidence gathered at a crime scene. Each frame told a truth I could no longer unsee. His hand, her smile, the distance I'd been feeling for months now captured in perfect clarity. It wasn't rage that filled me. It was direction. I finally knew what I was looking at, and what needed to happen next. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good one he always reserved for special occasions. Tonight, it was mine. As I took the first sip, I whispered to the quiet house, "If he wants nostalgia, I'll give him something to remember." That line lingered in the air like a vow, and somewhere deep inside me, something finally shifted. Not broken, but reborn. By Sunday morning, I had already chosen my mask. I smiled, poured his coffee, and kissed his cheek as if nothing had changed. The truth was now mine alone, a secret I wore like perfume, invisible yet intoxicating. Over breakfast, I mentioned the idea as casually as he once mentioned Julia. "We should host a small reunion next weekend," I said lightly. "Invite some of your old college friends. I'd love to meet Julia properly." The spoon froze halfway to his mouth. He hesitated, eyes flickering for a fraction of a second before landing on his plate. "Oh, sure, I'll ask," he said. That hesitation, that pause, was all the confirmation I needed. I smiled softly, brushing his hand. "Wonderful. It'll be nice to reconnect, don't you think?" He nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. The performance had begun, and this time I was the director. The week that followed was oddly peaceful. I threw myself into preparations, printing old photos, arranging candles, setting the table just right. I even found a picture of Mark and Julia in an old yearbook online, his hand on her shoulder, both of them grinning like they'd never grow up. I printed it, framed it, and placed it beside the wine glasses. Every detail mattered. Revenge, I was learning, was an art form, one painted in subtle strokes. When the evening arrived, the house looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Soft jazz playing, candles flickering against clean glass, the faint scent of vanilla and wine mingling in the air. Every detail was perfect, and yet the perfection itself felt weaponized. I'd spent the day arranging the space like a stage, because that's exactly what it had become. Every plate, every photo, every subtle reminder of our shared history, all part of the script I'd written for him. Julia arrived first. She looked nervous the moment she stepped through the door, her hands clasped too tightly, her smile just a bit too rehearsed. "Olivia, it's so nice to finally meet you," she said, her voice tremoring under the weight of politeness. I smiled warmly, gesturing toward the living room. Really? He never mentioned you much, until recently. The words hung there, sweet but sharp, like sugar laced with glass. Mark arrived moments later, color draining from his face when he saw her standing there. He tried to act surprised, but his performance fell flat. I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek, my smile steady. Perfect timing, I said softly. Dinner's ready. Inside, I could almost hear the clock ticking, not toward dessert, but toward exposure. The evening was no longer about food. It was about revelation. Dinner began with polite conversation, a fragile, trembling thing. The clinking of cutlery filled the silence between sentences, each sound sharper than the last. Mark tried to lead the chatter, his laughter too forced, his eyes darting between me and Julia, like a man watching a bomb's countdown. Julia sipped her wine, hand shaking ever so slightly, pretending to admire the candles. I watched them both with the serenity of someone who already knew the ending. When dessert came, I decided it was time. I reached for my phone, smiling as I stood. I thought we could look at some old memories, I said sweetly. I tapped the screen, and the TV lit up. Photos flickered across it, college parties, graduation, and then the wine bar, their hands almost touching, his smile, her laugh. Every secret, frozen in digital clarity. The room fell silent, except for the low hum of the speakers. Mark's face went pale. Julia's glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. He stammered something. Olivia, please. But I cut him off before he could breathe another lie. Sit down, I said softly. You'll want to see how this ends. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Truth has its own volume, and tonight, it was deafening. The sound of Julia's glass breaking still echoed through the room when she stumbled toward the door, tears streaking her face. I didn't stop her. She wasn't the point. She was just the reflection of his choices, the visible symptom of a deeper rot. Mark rose to follow her, but I stepped into his path, blocking the door with a composure that startled even me. Don't bother, I said quietly. She's not the only one who saw you tonight. He blinked, confused, until I held up my phone. A small red dot glowed on the screen. Live. I streamed the dinner, I explained, almost casually. Private group, just family, a few close friends. You know, the ones who still thought you were the devoted husband. His mouth opened, then closed, his face collapsing into disbelief. You didn't, he started, but I cut in, my voice soft, almost tender. I did. For years, I'd been the woman who kept his secrets, smoothed his lies, built a life out of half-truths. Tonight, I simply returned them. The silence stretched long and heavy between us. He looked around the room, the candles still flickering, the photos still glowing on the screen, and realized everything he'd built was now burning, quietly, from the inside out. He tried to speak, something about how it wasn't what it looked like, or I just needed someone to talk to, the usual symphony of cowardice. I didn't interrupt. I let him talk, watching his mouth move while his words turned to static in my mind. How many times had I filled those silences for him? How many times had I believed the performance because it was easier than facing the truth? Not anymore. When he finally ran out of breath, I met his eyes. You built your life on lies, I said quietly. Every late meeting, every half-truth, every babe. Don't worry. You laid bricks with them, Mark. And tonight, I just made sure everyone saw the foundation crumble. He flinched at the calmness in my voice. Maybe because there was no trace of love left, not even hate. Just clarity. Real, sharp, irreversible clarity. He looked small then, not in the physical sense, but in spirit. A man stripped of the illusion that power equals secrecy. I didn't want to hurt you, he whispered. I almost laughed. You didn't want to get caught, I corrected. And you did. For a moment, he looked at me like a stranger, and I realized that's exactly what he was. I didn't wait for him to answer. There was nothing left to explain, No apology that could crawl its way through the wreckage he'd made. I walked past him, my heels clicking against the tile, echoing through the hollow quiet of what used to be our home. The photos still glowed faintly on the screen. Proof, confession, closure. I stopped halfway up the stairs, turned just enough to see him standing there, hands trembling at his sides. "You can turn off the lights when you're done," I said. "It's your mess now." He looked around like a man waking from a dream into a nightmare he'd designed himself. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. Pity was a luxury for women who still hoped for change. I wasn't one of them. I'd already packed my truth, my dignity, and my silence. Everything else could stay. Upstairs, I closed the bedroom door and leaned against it. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful. Not happy, not whole, but mine. Downstairs, I could hear him moving, muttering something I didn't care to catch. Whatever words he found came too late. The woman who once needed his honesty no longer existed. In her place stood someone quieter, sharper, and free. Months later, I woke to sunlight spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of light that doesn't ask permission to enter. My apartment overlooked the park, green, open, alive. I'd traded marble countertops and designer silence for laughter from strangers below and the soft hum of traffic that reminded me the world kept moving, with or without him. On the kitchen counter, my phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. Divorce finalized. Full settlement approved. I exhaled, long and slow, like letting go of a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I didn't smile right away. I just stood there, absorbing the stillness, the kind that doesn't ache anymore. Freedom isn't loud, it's quiet. It's coffee brewed exactly how you like it. It's sleeping diagonally in your bed. It's peace that doesn't need an audience. When I finally did smile, it wasn't for the victory. It was for the return to myself. A knock at the door pulled me back. Clara stood there holding 2 coffees and that grin that had carried me through the worst. "How's life without the college friend?" she teased, handing me a cup. I laughed, the sound feeling lighter than I remembered. "Peaceful," I said, taking a sip. "And you know the best part? He's still trying to catch up. Only now he's doing it alone." After Clara left, I walked to the balcony, coffee in hand, watching people move below. Couples, joggers, a mother pushing a stroller. Ordinary lives. For years, I'd envied simplicity, mistaking it for weakness. Now I understood it was strength, the kind that doesn't need applause. I wasn't haunted anymore. The anger had dissolved somewhere between sleepless nights and quiet mornings where I learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and new beginnings. I'd kept one framed photo, not of us, but of me on our wedding day. I looked young, unguarded, unaware. I didn't pity her. She did what she could with what she knew, but the woman staring back at me now had earned her stillness. Every wound had a purpose. Every silence had shaped her. I set the frame down, grabbed my bag, and headed out. The city felt wide open, alive with possibility. And as I locked the door behind me, I whispered to no one in particular. He wanted to relive the past. So I gave him one, the kind that ended exactly where it should have,